All right, before we start, I really want to get the contacts of the person who found the dungeon. I feel like my life will be a lot more exciting if I'm around you. So it's 2:40. It's 2:40 p.m., guys. When we said 1:30, obviously we were talking about 1:30 Eastern time, so it's really 10 minutes late. But this sort of perpetual lateness, I really can't say anything to you all because I came late too. So I relate, but it's an interesting thing, although it's a joke and everything, but it's interesting how it's sort of normalized to be late. It's normal. It's Habesha time. It's a chronic disease, if you guys don't know. And it's interesting how it's normal, so it's fine. It's not fine, but it's fine, right? You're like, okay, I get it. I understand. You even come late, right? You're like, okay, 1:30, that means the show's going to go at 2:45. So I'll be here at 3, right? That's what we usually do. And I promise you this plays into the sermon. And what we're going to talk about for the next 4 weeks is about transfiguration. And I'll talk about what that means. But the title here is God is, Therefore I Am. And we'll talk about this more, but it's based on, if you can go to the next slide, it's based on this book. During this past Lent, I read this book called Elements, The Transfiguration of Elijah. And it's by an anonymous author, and he's actually a priest in the Coptic Orthodox Church, but he doesn't say who he is. It's a novel, and it's a really relatable story. It's a really relatable story because Elijah, the main character, comes from an Egyptian background, and his family migrates to Canada, and that's where the story takes place in the 90s, late 80s, 90s. Is it too loud? Are we good? Okay. So in the late 80s, 90s, in the late 80s and 90s, and I thought it really spoke to me because it sort of follows for most of us, where we're first generation. We come from back home, and our parents come here, and there's some disconnect in the culture, and our experience is very unique. Well, I wouldn't say unique; it's different, and everybody's experience can be unique, but it's different, and there is an importance in representation in stories, right? You sort of have to walk into that life, and sometimes if it's a story from long ago, or something that you don't relate to, although you understand the concepts, you might not relate to the story. But this is one you can definitely relate to. So I'm gonna call on you guys to, if you can, order it on Amazon. You don't have to read this book to follow along this Sunday school visit for the next 4 weeks, because I'm going to try not to give away anything from the book, because there are a lot of things in the book. I mean, you get to page 30, and if you're not hooked, I promise I'll pay you back, and I promise I'm not getting anything from the book. So you don't have to read the book, but I highly suggest it just for your own self. What I found when I was during Lent time, when I was reading it, I was really taken out of my current situation. Like so we live in our lives. It's a very routine-based life, right? And that's fine. Routine is not bad, but it becomes mundane. It becomes such a routine. It's almost as if you're not living. You're just existing and going from day to day to day. And reading this book during Lent, and I really got into it because it was like written by an Orthodox person. I was like, okay, great. Like I don't have to, I just let my guard down, just read through it, and I really was taken out of my current situation, my current life, and into that world of a character who to a certain degree, I can relate to. And two emotions came from that. One is, I'm able to see what's possible. So that's beautiful. Like, you're able to see that for most of us, God exists in just Sundays, or just Monday mornings at the time you're praying, that 5 minutes or 5 seconds for some of us, or the evenings right before sleep. So God exists in bursts. He's not there. Well, he's there always, but we're not with him at all times. It's only when we're here, right? Like when there's fellowship with people, with others, God is there. And you feel it, and you feel joy, and that joy is a different type of joy. And during your deep prayers and all of that. But outside of that, at school, at work, it's almost a different world. And the problem is, that's what we spend most of our time on. Like, that's it. Like 95%, without exaggeration. I'm not going to go into the math, but I would believe it's 90 at least, of our lives is spent void of God. Imagine that. 90% of our lives. And like looking at this book and this specific character who I can relate to, and all of us can relate to, as someone who was diaspora, came from, his family came and he was born there, but he was a little kid, and then experienced life in a first world country, would be Canada or here. And then for that person to be able to navigate in their lives and be able to find that God again, and what it means to have a sacramental life, what it means to be with God at all times. And then when that 90%, 10%, when you think about that, it makes sense where there's some disconnect sometimes, where we struggle sometimes. And don't get me wrong, the story in the book shows the struggle of this person. Christianity, our faith, is not void of struggle. In fact, it might be more, but there's certain internal peace that's gained from it. And there's certain internal transfiguration, growth that's gained from it. And we're talking about what transfiguration means. So when you go to the next slide, what is transfiguration? Transfiguration is to change in form. I think in Greek, it's pronounced metamorphosis. Sounds like metamorphosis. And the best, one of the most common things that you think about when something changes from one form to another is from a caterpillar to a butterfly, right? And what's important about this concept is there's nothing external in the caterpillar that made it a butterfly. It's all internal. And when you look at the two, most of us live in that in the caterpillar state. And not only do we live in that caterpillar state, we have accepted our caterpillarism. We've accepted it. We don't actually see anything else beyond it. We can't think of a butterfly. We think that's like finding a dungeon. That's something we'll never encounter. So that's transfiguration. And we'll see throughout the book, like I said, we'll take concepts of the book. You don't have to read the book, but it would be great if you did. We'll see what that means, okay? So we go to the next slide. Before transfiguration, in the story, there's this guy, Elijah, and it starts off as a kid. We start his story as a child, and there's a level of innocence in that child. Now, his is a little, it's extreme. Like, he would talk to the icons. He'd be having conversation with Saint Mary. That might not be something I experienced, but you can definitely relate to that innocence as a child. That sense of wonder, sense of being present, that excitement. As a child, you're an adult, you're walking through life like this. Yeah, right, nice. As a child, everything excited you. What changed is not the external thing, it's the internal thing over time. And we see in Genesis, it says, then God said, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and the wild animals, over all creatures that move along the ground. We see in Genesis, at the beginning, we see Adam and Eve, like they were naked. Who cares? There's this level of innocence in the beginning, at the beginning of the story, where God made man and woman in his image. In our childhoods as well, there's a level of innocence. And over time, there are times where whether it be trauma, whether it be whatever it is, over time, that innocence is shed. You can go to the next slide. It's like at the beginning where it says, we were made in his image. And the reason why I want to focus on this is this caterpillar internally has the ability or has the potential to be a butterfly. We have the potential for transfiguration, right? We have that potential. Why do we have that potential? We're made in his image, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them, Ephesians 2:10, and have put on a new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator, Colossians 3:10. You can go to the next slide. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed, aka transfigured, into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. This comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. 2 Corinthians 3:18. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. You can go to the next slide. So, in his image, God is, therefore I am. God is, therefore I am. We're made in his image. This potential of transfiguring to something more than what we are, and in fact, what we have accepted to be. Because the only limitation is us. I was talking to someone recently, and we were talking about why don't we mention God in our work? Like, for example, I work in the ER, and there are days where I would have, there's this thing called the doctor's prayer, and I would read it, and it talks about God give me the hands of healing and specifically focusing on that specific individual. And I would do that, and then going into the room, if I were to leave, this lady recently said to me, I think she mentioned an apostle. Is it John that's a physician? Luke, right? She said John though. But she's like, you're John to me. I was like, all right. Bye. And why is that? Because I can tell you, if that prayer is done, it transforms the experience. It transforms the experience in that it takes you out of you. You're no longer, because the focus otherwise is, okay, how am I going to do this, and how are they going to perceive me? How am I going to this and that? There's so much me in it. And when we're stuck in me, we miss the world, right? You're stuck in me, you're stuck in your own problems, you miss everything around you. And there are times you're like, damn, wow, the time has gone by, so what happened? It's you don't know what happened. It's been so long, things around you have changed, and people have moved on, and this and that. But you, yourself, because we are focused so internally on ourselves, not on God, that we're no longer present. And even when we're present, we're no longer present. So we don't know what happens. We're sort of living in a routine. And since it's a routine, since it's 90% of our time, 90 plus, it's an easy thing to go back into. So if I pray, right, I promise you, I've done this prayer. I've been working for 5 years. I've done this prayer for like maybe 10 times. Why is that? Like, it gives you have this feeling of transformation, but it's so easy to go back to routine. Something happens, that's the first thing to go. And the reason why I mention all of this is, so I was talking with this guy and saying, like, he started a college ministry, and he was saying how, and he's an engineer and works in a company, and he would try not to bring his faith into the workplace, because there is this, I don't know, whatever is understanding that faith is personal, and so you don't share, and you don't want to make others uncomfortable. Whatever that may be, whatever excuses there are, you try to separate it. And so this guy, usually on Thursdays, the other workers would go somewhere at a certain time of the day, and he always wondered where they would go. And several months later, he finds out they had a Bible study. He was like, "Oh, why didn't you invite me?" And they were like, "Well, it didn't seem like you'd be someone who's interested." And what we sort of realized is the only limits of why there isn't God in the workplace or in the non-traditional places of your life, the only limitation is in our minds. The only limiting person, the limiting factor is our mind. And it lists layers and layers of reasons. I don't want to offend. What does that even mean? If you believe something, you believe it. And you practice it. What does "I don't want to offend" mean? Does it really mean I don't want to offend? Or does it really mean, what would they think of me? Like, I want to appear as, relatable and cool as the other person. And we'll talk about that. That actually story is going to come up. But we sort of got into that story. So we are stuck. Most of us live in this life and think we're supposed to live it as caterpillars. I cheated. That's a moth caterpillar, but there's a difference between moth caterpillars and caterpillars. I don't know. It's not my area of expertise. But this is what we've chosen, and this is what we've believed. So you choose this over a long period of time. You believe it over a long period of time. You know what it becomes? It becomes the truth for you. It becomes the truth for you. It's not the truth. It just becomes the truth for you. And so it becomes very difficult to transform. You can go to the next slide. The reason why I have this here is to prove to you that that thing actually became this. And then it's a process too. It's a process, not a one-time thing. It's a process. It takes time, but it comes internally. The thing like wraps itself around a cocoon. Like I said, I don't know the details, but that's what happens, and it's internal change. All right, and go to the next slide. So in this book, it's divided into 4 different phases of a person in this transfiguration into becoming like God. And we'll talk about it in each week. There's the earth, water, fire, and wind. Go to the next slide. So going back to innocence. At the beginning, innocence is a strange gift. On one hand, it protects the one clothed in her. On the other hand, once shed, it's difficult for one to recover her. In the Garden of Eden, it was said that Adam and Eve were complete, whole, and in total harmony with God first, themselves, nature, and each other. It was only after the fall that the mind found itself wandering far from the heart. And this is important. They were in total harmony with see the levels. First, in total harmony with God first. You cannot be in total harmony with yourself unless you're in total harmony with God first. You can't be in total harmony with the nature unless you're in total harmony with yourself. And I don't think you can be in total harmony with others unless you're in total harmony with nature, yourself, and God. But it's stepwise. It happens all together at the same time too, but it's from internal out. Like at the core of who we are is not ourselves. It's the image of God. At the core of who we are, it's not ourselves. It's the image of God. So to get to that core, like I said, it goes from in out. It doesn't go from out to in. This transformation is from in out. To get to that core, there is being one with God and communion with God. That core then lends itself to, for us to be one with ourselves. Hey, what does it mean to be one with ourselves? Listen, we can lie to ourselves. Like, I think intuitively we know we can't lie to God. I think intuitively we know we can't lie to God. The next best thing is to lie to yourself. And once we lie to ourselves, then we will believe that lie. And it's not like there's a mastermind of us in the background saying, I'm lying to myself, I know. It's subconscious. It's not consciously lying to self. It's subconsciously lying to self. Go to the next slide. We all yearn for this earlier years of ourselves. Listen, if you want to see yourself acting a fool, watch if somebody takes a recording of you with a kid or with like a baby. You be acting a fool. Like, whoa, you watch that without the baby in the picture, you've lost it. But there's this yearning for innocence. There's this yearning for innocence. There's this yearning for that realness. Because it is realness. It's real and present. Children will tell you how they feel. If I'm like, we see kids about 20% of the time, I go into the room, they don't like me, they will let me know. They'll start crying right away. No matter what I do, that's it. If they like you, if they like me and I do something like, look into their ears or whatever, that's it. It's done. We're no longer friends. They will look at you a certain way, but they will make it known. They're honest. They're open. In a way, that's a way because they don't regulate their internal and external things, but they're open and honest. But over time, they start to see, okay, if I do this, there is this reaction, so okay, I shouldn't do that. Even if that's what they want to do. Even if that's how they feel, oh no, I shouldn't do that because there's a certain reaction to it. Right? So over time, after layers and layers, the true self is now separated and there is a mask. There's an external acceptable way. Although it's not, it's acceptable in a way that we think is acceptable. We create an image of ourselves. This is how I should look. Maybe we have a model of us. The problem is that's not the model that God has for us. Everybody has a model. God has, butterfly. That's his, he says, your potential, the model for you're this type of butterfly. You got these like different type of patterns in your wings and all of that. You do these things. You go pick flowers. Our model of us, no matter how amazing we think it might be, it's a caterpillar, right? If a certain person has a model of themselves and it's like, I want to be rich, right? I want to be financially free. I want to be able to give this and that and provide for my family. And none of that is bad, but it's a caterpillar. It's not God's potential for us. We'll go to the next slide. There's this part in Elijah's story, and we're still in that realm of innocence. At the beginning, he would walk in, like, in the backyard. There's a park behind him. You walk into the trees and you just get lost. It says, each tree scraping against his sensitive hand spoke a language that he seemed to understand. I read that and I was like, what? He's talking to the trees now? But the reason why I bring this up is, like, there's a different world of spirits out there, right? We're so stuck in how things should be, because there's a model for it, right? The first thing as a kid in the story in the book, the dad sort of gets worried when he starts talking to trees, and he brings them like an Atari, which is a game at that time. This is set in the late 80s, early 90s. So it's like today's, I don't know what games are out there today. Xbox, I'm not sure if that's today, but it's like that. So and the dad tells him, hey, so you're gonna play Pac-Man, and the goal of Pac-Man is like to chomp and chomp on those blue ghosts, and that's the goal. And Elijah's like, okay, all right, so what's after that? And the dad's like, oh, my son is messed up. But that's a real question. And he was present. And kids can sometimes ask the darndest questions, but it's true. What's after that? Yeah, okay, you get more. You get a certain type of status. You go to school. There's a career. That's the model that's set for us. And it's important to know that that's not really what life is about. Because all of that model is considering or thinking that you will live here forever. And we know for sure that's not the truth. We see it every day. Somehow we have subscribed to that model. Next line. So, what happens to this innocent kid, Elijah? Well, he meets a girl. And starts off with saying, Martina walked into grade 7 English class. And that was it for Elijah. But we start seeing how this innocence sort of starts transforming. And you can go to the next line. The theme of this transformation is me too. And what I mean by that is, well, Elijah is different. He sort of is growing up in the church. He sees the icons and the saints as friends. He prays to them. He talks to them. He tells them his daily day-to-day activities. He even confesses do confessions with them. That's no one else in 7th grade. Well, there's someone he likes, and she actually likes him for that reason, that he's different. But he wants to relate. And so she says, oh yeah, me too. Right? Like earlier we were talking about somebody went to Jamaica, somebody did this, and somebody poked an eye or a tooth out. A tooth out. How did that happen? Poked with the finger. That's crazy. But like Elijah would be like, yeah, something like that happened to me too. The reason being wanting to relate. So imagine you. What are the times where you wanting to relate, not an outright lie. You're not going to say, yeah, I knocked my teeth out too. But like a little, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, me too. Me too, yeah. Why is that detrimental? Well, it is slowly but surely transforming you to not you. Such a simple statement, it says, but it is pregnant with a terrible danger. For in the moment there is within the human soul such a hunger for belonging that one once can begin little by little to shed who they are in order to extend the feeling of fellowship. So it's a good thing, it's fellowship. In order to extend the feeling of fellowship, the feeling of belonging, there's an ever so slightly small shedding of who you are. That is not shown, the effect is not shown in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year, but man, do this for a lifetime, and you don't even know who you are. We don't know who we are. There's a disconnect between the mind and the heart. Go to the next. Every inauthentic Me Too was like a single leaf falling from his foliage. And the example given was like in the fall, the trees are not going to be like, when the first tree or leaf falls, I bet the tree doesn't care. It's like, I got 999,000 left. But like 2 months later, you wouldn't even recognize this tree. Right? So this slow transformation, not for the better, but to stay a caterpillar. Next. The heart and the mind, there's a division there. And once it divides, and the reason why this happens is, imagine the first decision made to say me too is a decision by self. We make it. We're in control. We're in control because we want the desired effect, which is the fellowship. We want that effect. So we decide, as in we're in control now. When we're in control, there's a disconnect. Because who's supposed to be in control? Who's supposed to be in control? That's always the answer, guys. But why, right? Like the reason is he sees the butterfly, you see the caterpillar. You're only exposed to the caterpillar. So the leader, the visionary, is supposed to see the truth. Well, we can't. We're in it. We're in the story. We're in the process. So if we become leaders, we can only see next step. And next step, the most important thing, is to relate to this person. And that would be at the cost of who I am, although it's very minor that you're not able to know it. Next line. And what happens? So the name of the series is God is, therefore I am. Right? Well, in this state, it's I think, therefore I am. The only thing that matters becomes how you think. The problem is how you think changes. You know this to be true. Like, I promise you, what you thought about a certain thing has changed 50 times over your lifetime. Over last week. During this talk, I'm sure it's changed like 5 or 6 times. But the point is, it's not stable. Why is it not stable? Because we're not all-knowing, right? We're only limited knowing of a few situations. We're not all-knowing. So as we learn more, the thoughts change. That's reasonable. That's logical. We understand that. But somehow we think what we think at that moment is the all truth and nothing but the truth. And then a while later, when we think something else, and it's completely opposite of what we thought before, well, now this is the truth. The all truth, nothing but the truth. And then a while later, same thing. But it can't be I think, therefore I am. And the Bible in Jeremiah 17:9 says, the heart is deceitful above all things, beyond cure. Who can understand it? The heart is deceitful above all things. In fact, right now, your mind and heart is already separated. The heart is already deceitful above all things. What is your mind to do? Who do you rely on? Not you. Don't rely on yourself. Rely on God. Like, geez, we didn't even make it in time today. So just remember, don't rely on yourself. It's a daily and hourly, every minute, there is examples in your life that tells you, you should not rely on you. But somehow we get blind to that. All right. 1 John 1. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. The tester, the objective truth does not come from us, it comes from God. Whoa, wait, no, I thought you said everything comes internally. Yes. What's internal to us? What's the core? We're the image of God. So God is at our core. Right? Next line. The other thing, well, this is very, very relevant in the age of Amazon. I consume, therefore I am. Remember, the theme is like something, therefore I am. That's how we relate to things because we're impressionable. We're impressionable. We're not incorruptible. We're easily corrupted. And a way to know this is we forget. Like, continually we forget. We need to be reminded of things continually. Right? And so, I consume, therefore I am, leads to anything that threatens my consumption is threatening my very being. In this story, there's a place where Elijah, after he's grown, he goes to an all-exclusive, sort of all-you-can-eat, all-exclusive vacation. A very high, like 5-star place. And day one was amazing. Like the towels were great. He really mentioned the towels. And then the food was amazing. The scenery, everybody was nice. And then like day 2, day 3, day 4, there's a little bit complaining. Like, the pineapple juice had a little too much pineapple in it. I don't know. Day 1 was better. Oh, the AC. It took 30 more seconds to start working. It used to be 25 seconds. Now it's 55 seconds. And they start thinking, well, why? Like, this is a 5-star hotel. It's so exclusive. How am I complaining now? Because it's a moving target. Complaining comes from entitlement. Entitlement comes from I consume, therefore I am. My consumption defines me. So my very being is connected to that. It's a horrible way to live. That's how we live, though, most of the time. And even in that, though, there's a different world. I sent a package to a family member or a family friend, and it was in a different state. And so it was Amazon. And I've had Amazon stuff that was sort of stolen from me from outside of where I live, right? And nobody calls me about that. I mean, I understand, it's fine. But I send this item, and it's a big, like, mansion, and it has gates. And I was working, and somebody calls me from Amazon. I was like, whoa, somebody's calling me from Amazon? I answer the call, and they're like, sir, it seems like the gate is closed. Would you like us to leave the package outside of the gate, or would you like us to come back? What type of customer service am I getting here? And I realized, it's because it's It's like a mansion with a gate. So there's a different tier of people, and there's a different level of customer service for people. But I never knew that until, like, the only way I knew it is after I sent the package. And the reason why I sort of bring that up is, to me, in my world, I thought items are left and they're either lost or you retrieve it. But there's a whole department in Amazon that calls the rich folks and say, would you like us to leave the message or the package outside of your house, or do you want us to come back? Do you need some lawn work? Like, it's crazy, but it's sort of a different world. And the reason why that sort of clicked is because our state of being, our experience is not all there is. There is more. Now, the Amazon thing is more on the consumption part, but there is more on the spiritual side. There's a different world that we usually don't allow ourselves to have access to. All right. So we can go to the next line. So going back to this, Matthew 6:19-21. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I'm very interested in, one of my passions specifically is addiction medicine, and I think addiction or substance use or whatever it is, but as a whole, addiction is a very interesting thing, because in substance use disorders, what happens is there's a first time somebody tries something, whatever substance it is, there is a level of high that can never be reached. There is this one initial level of high, and then after that, it's always seeking and searching and trying to get to that level. People will never get to that level, and then that's why people will do more and more and more. But there's no level of satisfaction in it. And of course, what I'm talking about is actual substances, but I promise you, we're addicted to literally everything. To literally everything. There are times where I leave my phone for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, my heart starts beating. Oh, who's trying to reach me? No one's trying to reach me. No one's trying to reach you either. None of us. But there is a level of addiction that we've accepted, and we live as caterpillars. Caterpillars got addiction. Butterflies don't. All right, next line. God is. What is God? We say, I think, I consume. God is. Therefore I am, right? But what is God? God is. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. We can go to the next slide. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. All things were made through him, and without him not anything made that was made. Next. If God is the source of existence, then everything must follow the logic that God has provided for all things that exist. If God is the source of existence, then everything must follow the logic that God has provided for all things that exist. Everything finds its purpose and identity in God. It is God who created, therefore, the creature finds its telos, or end, its destination, in God. We find our beginning, our middle, our end in God. And the disconnect for us is we agree with the beginning. and we have no choice but to agree with the end as well. But the middle is murky. The middle is, well, let me just explore as a caterpillar. And we need to always, and like I said, we are forgetful. We're forgetful. Nothing I say today is new to you. It's not new to me either. But acting upon something requires continuous and recurrent reminders. And the reminders have to be attached to actions. They have to be attached to actions. Otherwise, we get desensitized even to those. But when they're attached to actions, we become more sensitive. And there is growth. There is transformation. But words and actions, they're interchangeable. And why are they interchangeable? Well, remember, word, Christ, the word, everything that's said is meant. When God created the world through the word, he said, let there be. It's followed, let there be light. It's followed by light. It's not let there be light and nothing happens. Words are very powerful. Not in the realm of in our world. No, words are not powerful in our world. Where words are abundant in our world, right? They're abundant and they're cheap and they're on billboards and they're on everything that we see. They're in text form. So words are abundant. But in the spiritual world, words mean. Words are powerful. In fact, I'm just saying Jesus is the word. It's the word. So when we talk about God as the source of existence, and for us to find that life and the sacramental life in between, we have to make our words actionable, and we start seeing the new thing. We start unveiling our eyes and understand and start seeing the transformation and really believe that we were meant to be more than a caterpillar. We can go to the next line. You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, the world, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. The one who is in you is greater than the one who's in the world. Listen, we've done the world thing. We're in the world, right? We're in the world, and we've done the caterpillar thing. I promise you, there's nothing more. There's nothing more to it. A lot of people live, grow old, and die. There's really nothing great or exciting about it. Of course, what happens in the world, and the constructs of the world, is to always keep us distracted, to always say there's something better. There's always something. There's always next. But that's the problem, right? If somebody sells you something and you take it and you say it's not great, and that person says, well, this is for the next, and the next one is great, and you take that next one and that's not great. You have to start looking at it and say, well, the product, look at the product. The product in your possession is not great. So the company that's making that product is going to continue to make lackluster products that you're not going to have any satisfaction in. Whereas in God, it is completely different. It's very difficult. And we'll talk about this in the next few weeks. We're going to talk about this transformation. We're going to talk about what it means to be earth to transform into water and fire and the wind. But we just, the reason for this, for today, is to realize that we can continue to be caterpillars. I promise you, it's very easy. But we have to understand that that's not what we're meant to be. We have to understand that. And there will be a time, sometimes, it can get so distorted. The mind can get so distorted that if you're a caterpillar, even knowing what the butterfly does, you don't want to be that. That's a distortion, though. That's a distortion. It's really the core. The core is fear. The core is really disbelief. Can I really? Is that really possible? No. I'm going to stick to what I know. That's what we do all the time. Most of the time, that's what we do. We want to stick to what we know. We know the end result of it, but we still want to stick to what we know. There's comfort in familiarity. Right? There's comfort in familiarity. So we're familiar with something, even if that thing was, we are like, for example, Toyotas are great, but there are other cars too. But there's comfort in familiarity, right? He's not going to get the 2020 Toyota. It's 2004. The 2004 is his base one. That's the best one because my uncle had it, and I'm going to continue buying that same one. But there is comfort in familiarity, but that's not what it's supposed to be. That's not our story. Our story is etched by God, and it's much grander. It's not in our understanding of what grand and what isn't grand. When I say it's much grander, it's not you're going to be the most famous person in the world. Well, listen, we know the most famous people in the world. Like when I was a kid, Michael Jackson was it for me. But it's such a sad, life, right? You think that if you had that and you had that experience, it would be different for you? No. We see on and on again, over and over and over again, what we think is a success, what we think is grand, it's not. There's something else, there's something more. So I hope you guys will continue to come in these next 3 more weeks, the 14th, the 20-something, and 27th. I hope you guys continue to come. Don't miss the rest of the story. I hope you guys can get it. If you get a chance, read the book. Yes, you're busy. I understand busyness of life, I promise you. But you're really not busy. I promise you as well. I'm not busy, really. But I'm busy. And, we get each other, right? We get each other, yeah. But you do have time for this. You make time for other things, I promise you. You make time for other things. If there's a new show on Netflix that's to your liking, I promise you'll make time for it and you'll binge it this week. Well, binge this book, man. And bring someone else next week. And we'll continue from there. All right? We're done. So see you guys next week.